My daughter Tiffany called me a cow at her engagement party in front of all of Chicago's elite. The cruel laughter stopped only when her powerful father-in-law to be, Mr. Davenport, went pale. He recognized me not just as his new boss, but as the humble bank clerk who saved his most important deal 15 years ago. The Davenport estate wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Marble floors gleamed under chandeliers that dripped crystals like frozen tears. I stood near the entrance, my simple navy blue suit feeling like a woolen blanket in a room full of silk. It had cost me $40, a sensible purchase. I clutched a small hand-painted jewelry box, a gift for Tiffany. My hands felt rough against the smooth wood. For a moment, I saw the ghost of my husband, James, standing beside me, his hand on my back, whispering, "You belong anywhere, Maggie." But he was gone, and I was alone in this glittering jungle. Tiffany floated through the room in a white dress that probably cost more than my car. She was talking to a circle of women with tight faces and bright jewels. Then she saw me. Her smile didn't just fade, it curdled. She walked over, her fiancé Richard trailing behind her like a well-behaved puppy. He was a decent boy, but soft, weak. Tiffany's voice was a low hiss, meant only for me. "What are you doing here, mother? I told you to come later." After the main guests arrived, I held out the gift. "I wanted to give you this." She didn't take it. She just stared at the box, then at my suit, a look of pure disgust on her face. A few people nearby turned to look, their conversations faltering. This was the moment she chose. Her voice rose, no longer a whisper, but a sharp, ugly announcement to the room. "Oh, everyone, you must meet my mother. This is the inconvenience I was telling you about." Someone tittered nervously. Richard looked at the floor. My heart felt like a cold, hard stone in my chest. A woman with a diamond necklace that could fund a school asked, "Tiffany, darling, what does your mother do?" Tiffany laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "She pushes paper, a clerk, for 40 years. Can you imagine?" Then she looked straight at me, her eyes merciless. "Sometimes I feel like she's this fat cow we just have to drag along with us." The room exploded with laughter. It wasn't just a chuckle, it was a wave of cruel, sharp sounds that hit me from all sides. My face burned. My hands started to shake, the little wooden box feeling impossibly heavy. I felt 200 pairs of eyes on me, judging me, dismissing me. I was 68 years old, and my own child had just branded me for slaughter. But I didn't cry. Years in the back office of Chicago Central Bank taught me to keep my composure. You see everything, you hear everything, and you show nothing. As the laughter began to subside, I noticed one person wasn't laughing. Mr. Davenport, Richard's father, a man whose face I'd seen on the cover of Forbes, was staring at me. His smile was gone. His face, usually ruddy with confidence, was slowly draining of color. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes locked on mine with a dawning, horrified recognition. The air in the room shifted. The remaining laughter caught in people's throats. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And I knew, in that instant, that the world I had built in secret for 40 years was about to collide with the one where I was just a fat cow my daughter had to endure. 35 years ago, the world ended. It ended on a Tuesday, with a phone call from a foreman at the steel mill. James was gone, an accident, a word so small for a hole so big. I was 33, with a 5-year-old Tiffany and a life insurance policy for $25,000. The grief was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. People brought casseroles and offered condolences. They all said, "You're so strong, Margaret." I wasn't strong. I was terrified. The $25,000 felt like a ticking clock. It had to last. It had to be the foundation for Tiffany's future, the one James and I had dreamed of. A week after the funeral, I put on my best blouse, the one with the small floral print, and went to Chicago Central Bank. Not to see a financial advisor, to get a job. They offered me a position in the back office, in the operations department. Processing transactions, a clerk. The pay was modest, but the benefits were solid. It was a lifeline. My desk was in a huge, windowless room that hummed with the sound of computers and the quiet rustle of paper. I was a ghost in the machine. My job was to verify and process the endless flow of money that powered the city. I saw everything: mergers, acquisitions, venture capital flowing into tiny tech startups no one had ever heard of. I saw the names of powerful men and women moving millions with a signature. They never saw me. I was just a set of initials at the bottom of a confirmation slip. At night, after tucking Tiffany into bed, I wouldn't watch television. I'd sit at my kitchen table, the one James had built, with a stack of cheap notebooks. I started my own ledger. In it, I tracked the deals I processed. I wrote down the name of the acquiring company, the target, the amount. Then I'd go to the library and read old newspapers on microfiche, studying the history of those companies. I wasn't just pushing paper at work, I was learning the language of money. I saw the patterns. A small, seemingly insignificant purchase of a supplier company often preceded a massive rally in the parent company's stock 6 months later. An influx of capital from a specific venture fund into a biotech firm meant a breakthrough was imminent. It was all there, in the dry, boring paperwork that my colleagues complained about. It was a map, and I was learning to read it. One night, I processed a $100,000 investment into a small software company. I'd seen their name before. They had a solid, if boring, business model. But the investor was a man I knew from the ledgers to have a golden touch. Everything he backed turned to gold within a year. My heart was pounding. The $25,000 from James's life insurance was sitting in a low-interest savings account. It was supposed to be for Tiffany's college. It was sacred. But I took $100. Just 100. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely fill out the purchase order for my own brokerage account. I felt like a thief, stealing from my daughter's future. I bought shares of that small software company. 6 months later, my $100 was worth $1,500. I didn't sell, I held. A year later, it was worth $5,000. That was the beginning. I never touched the principal of James's money again. I only used the profits. I created a separate legal entity, a shell corporation with the help of a quiet old lawyer my father had known. I called it Croft, Miller Margaret. My name, hidden in plain sight. For 40 years, I lived two lives. By day, I was Margaret Miller, the quiet clerk in the back office, eating my sandwich at my desk, my salary just enough to pay the bills and keep our small house in a working-class neighborhood. By night, I was Croft, a phantom investor, moving profits from one venture to another, building an empire on the data crumbs left by the giants of finance. I never got greedy. I made small, strategic moves. I bought land in undeveloped areas years before the developers even looked at the maps. I invested in technology that sounded like science fiction. While Tiffany was in high school, complaining about my cheap clothes and our old car, Croft was worth $10 million. While she was in college, ashamed to introduce me to her new, wealthy friends, Croft's assets hit $50 million. All of it was for her. Every decision, every risk, was to build a wall of security around her so high that nothing could ever touch her. She saw a poor, unambitious mother. She had no idea she was looking at a queen in disguise, guarding a fortress built just for her. The distance between us started not as a chasm, but as a hairline crack. It began when Tiffany went off to the University of Chicago on a scholarship I couldn't have afforded, but Croft could have bought the whole campus. She came home for that first Thanksgiving, and she was different. She used new words, held her fork in a new way. She talked about her friends, their summer homes in Michigan, their fathers who sat on corporate boards. She never asked about my job. When her friends asked what her mother did, she developed a clever, vague answer. She's in finance. It wasn't a lie, but it felt like one. It was the first time she polished me up for public viewing. She was sanding down my rough edges, the parts of me that didn't fit into her new, shiny world. I let her. I thought it was a phase, a young girl's insecurity. I didn't realize it was the foundation she was laying for a lifetime of shame. The crack widened when she met Richard Davenport. He was from a different world, a world of generational wealth and casual power. His family name was carved into the facades of half the buildings in downtown Chicago. When Tiffany first brought him to our small house, I could see her watching him, her body tense, as if waiting for him to mock the worn furniture or the linoleum floors. He was polite. He complimented my cooking and called me Mrs. Miller. But after he left, Tiffany fell apart. "He must think we're so poor," she cried, tears of pure humiliation streaming down her face. "Why couldn't you have been more, Mom? Why are you just this?" This was a woman who had worked for 20 years to give her everything. It was the first time her shame felt like a blade. After that, the invitations to her world became scarce. I wasn't invited to the university galas. It's a student thing, Mom. You'd be bored. I wasn't invited to meet the Davenports at their country club. It's so stuffy. You'd hate it. I became a secret. A backstory she edited for her audience. The few times I did see her with her new friends, she would introduce me quickly, then steer the conversation away. I was Margaret, her mother. No last name, no profession. Just a footnote in the story of her glamorous life. The phone calls became less frequent. She was always busy. A charity auction, a weekend in the Hamptons, a gala for the new wing of a museum. I kept track of her life through the society pages of the Chicago Tribune, my heart aching as I saw her smiling in photos, always without me. My old kitchen table, the place where she used to do her homework while I made dinner, became a shrine to a daughter I was losing. I kept a picture of her there, a smiling girl with braids and a gap-toothed grin. Sometimes I'd talk to it. She's just finding her way, I'd whisper to the ghost of my little girl. But I knew it was more than that. She wasn't finding her way, she was erasing her past. And I was her past. The most painful part was that she had no idea what she was rejecting. She saw a low-level clerk, a woman in a cheap suit. She didn't see the woman who had just acquired a controlling interest in a biotech firm that was about to cure a rare disease. She didn't see the woman who was anonymously funding scholarships for kids from our old neighborhood. She saw a failure. And the worst part? I let her believe it. I told myself it was for her own protection, that the money would complicate things, that it would attract the wrong people. But the truth, the ugly truth I couldn't admit even to myself, was that I was afraid. I was afraid that if she knew about the money, she would only love the money. And I had a desperate, foolish hope that one day she would learn to love me, Margaret Miller, the bank clerk, just for who I was. It was a stupid hope, and it was about to cost me everything. After Tiffany and Richard got engaged, the requests for money began. They weren't framed as requests. They were emergencies. They were opportunities. They were always urgent. It started with the down payment for their condo, a sleek glass box overlooking Lake Michigan. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime deal, Mom," Tiffany said over the phone, her voice breathless with excitement. "The Davenports are helping, of course, but we need another $50,000 to seal the deal. Just as a short-term loan." I knew from my work that the condo was overpriced. I also knew the Davenports could have bought the whole building with pocket change. This wasn't about need. It was about entitlement. But I wrote the check. I transferred it from one of my smaller personal accounts, $50,000. It felt like an offering, a desperate attempt to buy my way back into her life. I thought it would be a one-time thing. I was wrong. It was like opening a floodgate. A few months later, it was a car. Richard's old BMW was unreliable. They needed something safer, something more fitting for a young power couple, $25,000 for a down payment on a new Mercedes. I wrote the check. Then it was a club membership. "We have to network, Mom. It's all about connections." $15,000. I wrote the check. Each time she would be sweet and loving for a few days. She'd call me, ask about my day, then the warmth would fade and she'd disappear again until the next financial crisis. I was becoming a transaction, an ATM. My lawyer, Arthur, the only person in the world who knew both sides of my life, warned me. We sat in his dusty office, the air thick with the smell of old books and coffee. He was a stooped, gentle man with eyes that saw everything. "You're teaching her that you are a resource, Margaret, not a mother," he said, his voice soft. "She's not just asking for money. She's taking your dignity." I knew he was right, but the fear of losing her completely was a raw, gaping wound. I kept paying, hoping to staunch the bleeding. The pressure escalated. They started talking about my house, the small brick bungalow I'd lived in for 40 years, the house where I'd raised her, where every corner held a memory of James. "It's a teardown, Mom," Tiffany said one afternoon, looking around my living room with a critical eye. "But the land value in this neighborhood is skyrocketing. You could sell it for at least $400,000. Think of what you could do with that money." I knew what she meant. Think of what they could do with that money. "This is my home, Tiffany," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Her face hardened. "It's a sentimental attachment. It's holding you back. It's holding us back. The us was the final twist of the knife. She was making her financial ambitions my responsibility, my duty. They started bringing it up every time we spoke. They'd send me listings for small, sterile apartments in senior living communities. Look, Mom, a heated pool, a social club. They weren't selling me a better life. They were trying to liquidate my past. One evening, Richard called. He sounded uncomfortable. Margaret, he began, always more formal than Tiffany. We were looking at our finances, and Tiffany was wondering if maybe we could, get an advance on her inheritance. I felt the air leave my lungs. An advance on my inheritance. They wanted me to be dead. Not literally, perhaps, but financially. They wanted to carve up my life and sell it for parts while I was still living in it. No, I said. The word was small, but it felt like a cannon shot in the silence. What? No, Richard. The answer is no. There was a long pause. I could hear Tiffany's angry whisper in the background. Then Richard's voice came back, colder this time. Well, that's very disappointing, Margaret. We thought you'd want to help your family. I hung up the phone. My hands were trembling. I walked over to the old photo of James on the mantelpiece. His smiling face was a relic from a simpler time. What do I do, James? I whispered. What do I do with our little girl? But there was no answer. I was alone. And I was beginning to realize that the daughter I was trying so desperately to hold on to didn't exist anymore. In her place was a stranger with my daughter's face and a heart as cold and hard as the diamonds on her finger. The engagement party was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance for me to be included. Tiffany had called me herself. It's at the Davenport estate, 6 o'clock. Just try to look nice. The last 3 words were a casual stab. I spent a week searching for the right outfit. Nothing too expensive that would raise questions, nothing too cheap that would embarrass her. I settled on the $40 navy blue suit. It was simple, dignified. I thought it was a good compromise. I was wrong. From the moment I arrived, I was invisible. Tiffany greeted me with a kiss that didn't touch my cheek and then immediately turned away to talk to someone more important. I stood alone, holding my small gift, an island in a sea of champagne and air kisses. I watched my daughter. She was magnificent. She moved through the crowd with an easy grace I'd never seen in her before. She laughed, a sparkling, practiced sound. She belonged here, and I so clearly did not. I saw the way her friends looked at me. Their eyes would flick over my suit, my sensible shoes, my simple handbag. Then they would look away, a flicker of pity or contempt in their expressions. I was a curiosity, the poor relation, the skeleton in Tiffany's designer closet. I decided to find a quiet corner, to just observe, to be a fly on the wall of my daughter's new life. But she found me first. She brought over a woman dripping in emeralds. The woman looked me up and down. So, you're Tiffany's mother, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Tiffany tells us you're retired. I still work, I said quietly, at Chicago Central Bank. The woman's eyebrows shot up. Oh, a vice president then? Before I could answer, Tiffany jumped in, her voice falsely bright. Oh no, nothing that grand. Mom likes to keep things simple. She placed a hand on my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin. It was a warning. Be quiet. Don't embarrass me. And then came the moment that shattered everything. The moment that replayed in my head 1,000 times since. The woman with the emeralds pressed on. Well, what exactly is it that you do, dear? Tiffany looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw 40 years of resentment come to a head. The shame of our small house, the shame of my second-hand clothes, the shame of my unmanicured hands. It all coalesced into a single venomous point of cruelty. She leaned in, as if sharing a secret, but her voice was loud enough for the entire circle of guests to hear. Honestly, sometimes I feel like she's this fat cow we just have to drag along with us. The laughter was immediate and brutal. It wasn't just laughter. It was validation. Tiffany had made a joke at the expense of her simple, out-of-place mother, and this glittering, soulless crowd loved it. They were laughing with her, at me. In that moment, something inside me broke. The part that had made excuses for her. The part that had held on to hope. The part that had loved her unconditionally. It just snapped. I looked at my daughter, her face flushed with her social triumph, and I didn't recognize her. She was a stranger, a beautiful, cruel stranger. This wasn't just an insult, this was a verdict. She was publicly declaring that I was worthless, a burden, an animal to be tolerated. This was the critical point. The moment I stopped seeing her as the little girl I had to protect and started seeing her for what she was, a woman who would sacrifice her own mother for a moment of acceptance from a crowd of people who didn't matter. The room was spinning. The crystal chandeliers blurred into streaks of light. But through the haze of my own shock and pain, I saw Mr. Davenport. He was no longer looking at me with confusion. He was looking at me with absolute dawning certainty, and the terror on his face was the only thing that kept me standing. The world went silent, or maybe the laughter just faded into a dull roar in my ears. The only thing I could focus on was Mr. Davenport's face. The blood had drained from it, leaving behind a waxy, pale mask of disbelief. He took a step toward me, then another. The crowd parted for him, sensing a shift in the drama. Tiffany, still glowing from her cruel joke, finally noticed. Her smile faltered. "Mr. Davenport, is everything all right?" she asked, her voice laced with confusion. He didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on me. He stopped a few feet away. His voice was a hoarse whisper, but it carried across the suddenly quiet room. "Margaret Miller? From the operations department at Chicago Central?" My name. He remembered my name, not just my face. Tiffany's jaw dropped. You know my mother?" Mr. Davenport nodded slowly, his eyes wide with a dawning horror and understanding. "I remember," he said, his voice gaining a little strength. 15 years ago, the Davenport Towers deal, a $20 million transfer. My lawyers, your bosses, everyone missed it. A single digit wrong in an account number. The whole deal was about to collapse. He looked around the room at the stunned faces of his guests. "This woman," he said, pointing a trembling finger at me, "stayed until 3 in the morning, manually searching through thousands of transaction records. She found the error. She saved the deal. She saved my company." A murmur went through the crowd. This was not the story they were expecting. The fat cow was suddenly a hero. Tiffany looked like she had been slapped. "But you're just a clerk," she stammered, looking at me as if for the first time. And then Mr. Davenport's face crumpled as another, bigger piece of the puzzle clicked into place. He looked from me to the room and back to me. His voice dropped even lower, filled with a new kind of awe. Croft, he breathed. "The investor who just bought out Davenport Properties 2 weeks ago. The mysterious buyer no one has ever seen." He stared at me, his mind racing. Croft. Miller. Margaret. Oh my God. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a diamond drop on the marble floor. Every eye in the room was on me. The woman in the $40 suit, the bank clerk, the fat cow. I could see the gears turning in Tiffany's head, the confusion, the denial, the frantic calculations. She started shaking her head. No, that's impossible. My mother she's poor. She has nothing." Mr. Sark. Davenport took out his phone. His hands were shaking. He typed something, then stared at the screen. I knew what he was looking at. The final acquisition documents for his company, a $30 million deal. The signature on the bottom would be from my lawyer, Arthur, but the name of the purchasing entity would be Croft Holdings. He looked up from his phone, his face ashen. "It's you," he whispered. "You bought my company." My lawyer, Arthur, had advised me against attending the party. "It's a risk, Margaret," he had said. "They'll see you." I had insisted. I needed to see my daughter, to give her my gift, to hold on to that last shred of hope. Now, hope was a pile of ash at my feet, but something else was rising in its place, a cold, quiet power. For 40 years, I had been a ghost. Now, I was finally being seen, but it was too late. The daughter I had done it all for was a stranger. After the revelation, Tiffany went into a frenzy. She called me a dozen times a day. I didn't answer. She hired a private investigator to dig into Croft. Arthur, my loyal friend and lawyer, made sure he hit a wall of shell corporations and offshore accounts. The ghost remained a ghost. Tiffany couldn't prove anything, but the suspicion was eating her alive. She started showing up at my house, her eyes wild, demanding answers. I would just look at her calmly and say, I think Mr. Davenport was mistaken. It was a stressful evening for everyone. I was playing a game now, a cruel game perhaps, but she had taught me the rules. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the party. Tiffany showed up at my door one night looking like a ghost. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled, her makeup was smeared, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't bother with greetings. We're going to lose everything, she said, her voice flat and dead. She collapsed onto my old sofa, the one she had always hated. The condo, the car, everything. We're in debt. I sat down in my armchair, the one James had built, and waited. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't offer tea. I just waited. How much? I finally asked. Her answer came out in a choked whisper. $750,000. A staggering sum. The result of years of living a life they couldn't afford, propped up by credit cards and the illusion of future wealth. They had been counting on the Davenport money, but with the sale of the company, that future had evaporated. Mr. Davenport can't help us, she continued, staring at the worn pattern on my rug. He got a good price for the company, but he has his own debts to settle. We're on our own. Her eyes, when she finally looked up at me, were filled with a desperate, terrifying hope. Is it true, Mom? Are you Croft? Please, I need to know. If you have the money, you could help us, alone. We'll pay it all back, I swear. It was the moment I had been preparing for. The final test. I had spent the last 3 weeks with Arthur, drafting a document, a masterpiece of psychological warfare disguised as a legal agreement. I went to my small desk and retrieved a folder. I placed it on the coffee table between us. I am not Croft, I lied, my voice perfectly steady. But Mr. Davenport's story. It gave me an idea. I made some calls to some old contacts from the bank, people who owe me favors. Her eyes widened. She leaned forward, barely breathing. I opened the folder. Inside was a single, official-looking document, a loan agreement. Someone I know, a very private person, is willing to lend you the money, I said. But the terms are strict. Tiffany snatched the document. Her eyes scanned the page, her expression shifting from desperation to confusion and then to horror. Richard, who had been waiting in the car, must have seen her distress through the window. He came in without knocking. What's going on? He asked, rushing to her side. Tiffany just pointed at the paper, speechless. Richard picked it up and read it aloud. In exchange for a loan of $750,000, the borrowers, Tiffany and Richard Davenport, agree to the following conditions. He paused, his voice trembling slightly. 1. The borrowers will sign over the deed to their primary residence as collateral. 2. The borrowers will submit to monthly financial audits for a period of 10 years. 3. The borrowers will have no contact, direct or indirect, with Margaret Miller for the duration of the loan. Richard looked up from the paper, his face pale with shock. What is this? This isn't a loan. It's a prison sentence. It's asking you to sell your mother for money. But Tiffany didn't look shocked. She looked calculating. I saw her weighing the options in her mind. Her mother versus financial ruin. It wasn't even a contest. Who is this person? She asked, her voice low and intense. Why would they want me to stay away from you? He's a very old man, I improvised, the lie coming easily. He believes family is the root of all financial irresponsibility. He only invests in people who are willing to cut all ties. Richard threw the contract on the table. This is insane. We're not doing this. He turned to Tiffany, his eyes pleading. Tiff, tell her, this is wrong. But Tiffany didn't look at him. She looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw her answer. She was going to sign. She would sell me for $750,000. It was the final, ugly truth. My daughter's love had a price tag, and it was a price I was no longer willing to pay. You don't have to sign it, I said, my voice cold as ice. I stood up and took the folder, because the offer isn't real. They both stared at me, confused. I walked over to the fireplace and tossed the folder into the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and disappeared. There is no old man, there is no loan, there is only me. I turned to face them, the warmth of the fire at my back. And the answer to your question, Tiffany, is yes. Her breath hitched. Yes. What? Yes, I am Croft. I let the words hang in the air, heavy and solid and real. I watched the hope in her eyes curdle into pure, unadulterated terror. Because in that moment, she didn't just realize that I was rich, she realized that the woman she had just been willing to sell, the woman she had humiliated and despised for decades, held all the power. The game was over, and she had lost. The truth landed in the small living room like a bomb, shattering the fragile reality they had built. Tiffany just stood there, swaying slightly, her mouth open. Richard sank into a chair, running a hand over his face as if trying to wipe away a bad dream. The only sound was the crackling of the fake contract turning to ash in the fireplace. But how? Tiffany finally whispered. Her voice was thin, childlike. Your job, your house, your whole life. It was all a lie. It wasn't a lie, I said, my voice hard. It was a fortress. I built it to protect you, to give you a future your father and I dreamed of. I just didn't realize I needed to protect it from you. I walked to my desk and pulled out another folder. The real one. I didn't throw this one on the coffee table. I placed it there, gently. It was heavy with the weight of 40 years of my secret life. This is real, I said. I opened it. The first page was a summary of assets for Croft Holdings. The number at the bottom had 9 zeros after it. $150 million. Tiffany flinched as if the paper had burned her. Richard leaned forward, his face a mask of disbelief. I started laying out the documents, one by one. The deed to the building their favorite restaurant was in. The ownership papers for the tech company that made Richard's phone. The controlling interest in a pharmaceutical firm whose stock had made the Davenports a small fortune a decade ago. Each document was a brick in the invisible fortress I had built, each one a testament to the life I had hidden from her. The work I did, I said, my voice low and steady, the work you called pushing paper, gave me a front row seat to the biggest financial dramas in this city. I didn't just see the numbers, Tiffany. I saw the stories behind them. I saw the patterns. I saw the future. And I invested in it. Tiffany sank to her knees. The fight was gone. The arrogance, the entitlement, all of it was stripped away, leaving behind a raw, trembling core of shame. All those years, she sobbed, her words muffled by her hands. All those years I was so horrible to you. I was ashamed of you. And you were this. I was your mother, I corrected her, my voice softening just a little. That should have been enough. Richard finally spoke, his voice filled with a quiet awe. Mr. Davenport, my father. He always talked about that clerk who saved the Towers deal. He said it was the smartest financial mind he'd ever encountered. He just didn't know it was in the back office. He looked at me, his respect genuine. You didn't just see the future, Margaret. You built it. His words were a balm on a wound I didn't even know I had. To be seen, truly seen, for my mind, for my work. It was a powerful thing, but it didn't solve the problem of the woman sobbing on my floor. Tiffany looked up, her face a mess of tears and regret. The inheritance, she whispered. The things I said, asking for an advance. I heard you, I said. I pulled out one last document from the folder. It was my will. The original one. This was my plan, I said, placing it in front of her. 70% to charity, 30% to you. Enough to ensure you and your children would be comfortable for life. She stared at the paper, her breath catching in a sob. Then I reached back into the folder and pulled out a newer, thinner document, an addendum, dated the week after her engagement party. This is the new plan, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. 100% to charity. The silence in the room was absolute. This was the consequence, not just the loss of the money, but the final, irrevocable statement of her failure as a daughter. This was justice, cold, clean, and absolute. You get nothing, I said. Not because I want to punish you, but because I finally understand. Giving you money would be the worst thing I could ever do. It would prove you right. It would prove that my only value to you was my bank account. She didn't protest. She didn't argue. She just nodded, her body racked with sobs. She had finally hit the bottom. And for the first time, I had no desire to reach down and pull her up. She had to learn to climb out herself. The year that followed was the longest, quietest year of my life. The first thing I did was retire. I walked into the bank, not to my desk in the windowless back office, but to the top floor, to the president's office. He was a man half my age who had always nodded at me in the hallways with a polite, distant smile, seeing only a long-time, low-level employee. When his secretary announced that Croft was here to see him, the look on his face was something I will cherish forever. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it to close a chapter. I sold my little brick house, the one filled with ghosts and memories. The $400,000 from the sale, I donated anonymously to a fund for single mothers in my old neighborhood. I bought a penthouse apartment downtown, with windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a panoramic view of the city I secretly owned a piece of. For the first time, Margaret Miller and Croft lived at the same address. It was a strange and lonely existence. The silence in the huge, sterile apartment was deafening. I had spent so long hiding. I had forgotten how to live in the open. I had all the money in the world, but my life felt empty. Tiffany and Richard disappeared. I knew from Arthur that they had declared bankruptcy. They lost the condo, the Mercedes, the club memberships. They sold everything of value, right down to Tiffany's engagement ring. They moved into a small, rented apartment in a suburb I'd never heard of. Richard got a job as an accountant at a small logistics firm. Tiffany, for the first time in her adult life, had to work. She became a receptionist at a dental clinic. I didn't reach out. I had drawn a line in the sand, and I needed to know if she would be willing to cross it not for money, but for me. For 3 months, there was nothing. Just silence. I started to think I had lost her for good. Maybe it was for the best. Then, one Saturday morning, my doorman called. "Ma'am, there's a Tiffany Davenport here to see you. Should I send her up?" My heart leaped into my throat. "Yes," I managed to say. When she stepped out of the elevator, I almost didn't recognize her. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup. She looked younger and more tired than I had ever seen her. She was holding a small, clumsily wrapped package. She didn't say hello. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a raw, painful vulnerability. "I know I have no right," she began, her voice shaking, "but I needed to see you." I led her into the vast living room. She looked around, not with envy, but with a kind of sad wonder. "This is who you are," she whispered. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she pushed the package across the coffee table toward me. "It's not much," she said. "I made it myself." I unwrapped it. Inside was a small wooden jewelry box. On the lid, she had painted, with a slightly unsteady hand, a picture of the two of us. A mother and a little girl with braids, holding hands. It was a clumsy amateur painting, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "I'm in therapy," she said quietly. "I'm trying to understand why I did what I did, why I became that person." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "It wasn't about the money, Mom. Not really. It was about the shame. I was so ashamed of where we came from, and I thought money was the only way to escape it. I made you the symbol of everything I hated about myself." It was the first honest thing she had said to me in 20 years. "I don't want your money," she continued, her voice gaining a little strength. "I don't want your forgiveness because I haven't earned it. I just want to know, is there a chance? A chance for me to get to know my mother? The real one." I looked at the little box in my hands. I looked at the daughter sitting across from me, stripped of her arrogance and her defenses. The anger I had held on to for so long began to melt away, replaced by a familiar, aching love. "The real me," I said softly, "is a 68-year-old woman who is very, very lonely." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't cry. "Me too," she whispered. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a beginning. A fragile, tentative, and terrifyingly real beginning. That first meeting was followed by another, and another. We met every Saturday. At first, we met in neutral territory, a quiet coffee shop halfway between her apartment and my penthouse. We talked about small things, her job, the funny thing a patient said at the clinic, Richard's long hours, my attempts to learn how to cook something other than tuna casserole. We were like two strangers circling each other, afraid to get too close, afraid to say the wrong thing. We never talked about money. It was the unspoken rule, the ghost in the room. But its absence was a tangible presence. Without the dynamic of her needing and me providing, we had to find something else to talk about. We had to find each other. Slowly, tentatively, the walls began to come down. She started asking me questions about her father. What was he like? What were our dreams? I told her stories she had never heard, about our first date, about the way he used to sing off-key in the shower. I brought out old photo albums, and for the first time, she looked at them not with embarrassment, but with a deep, sorrowful curiosity. She was trying to piece together the past she had tried so hard to erase. One afternoon, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Tell me about your work," she said. "The real work. How did you do it?" So I told her. I told her about the long nights at the kitchen table, about the ledgers, about the thrill and terror of that first $100 investment. I explained my philosophy, investing not in stocks, but in people, in ideas, in the quiet, unseen work that holds the world together. She listened, her expression a mixture of awe and profound sadness. "All that time," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I thought you were doing nothing with your life, and you were doing everything." The day she brought Richard with her was a turning point. He looked me in the eye, his face serious. "Margaret," he said, "I have no excuse for my behavior. I was weak. I let Tiffany's ambition and my family's expectations cloud my judgment. I am deeply sorry for the pain I caused you." It was a simple, direct apology, and it was real. I saw in him the good man I had always hoped he was, finally free from the prison of his wife's aspirations. Then they told me. They sat across from me in the coffee shop, holding hands, a united front. "We're having a baby," Tiffany said, a small, genuine smile on her face. A baby, a grandchild, a new life, a new generation, a chance to get it right. I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it took my breath away. All the years of loneliness, all the pain, it all seemed to recede in the face of this news. "What are your plans?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "We're going to raise this baby differently," Richard said firmly. "They are going to know their grandmother, the real one. They are going to know the value of hard work, and that love isn't something you buy." It was at that moment I knew what I had to do. I had spent months trying to figure out the purpose of my fortune. I had built an empire, but for what? To die alone in a penthouse, surrounded by stock certificates? That wasn't a legacy. It was a prison. The following week, I didn't meet them at the coffee shop. I invited them to my lawyer's office, Arthur's dusty, old office. When they walked in, looking nervous and confused, Arthur and I were waiting for them at a large conference table. On the table was a thick, bound document. "What's this?" Tiffany asked, her eyes wary. "This is not about the will," I said quickly. "This is about the future." I pushed the document toward them. The title on the cover read, "The Miller Davenport Legacy Fund." "I'm not leaving you an inheritance," I said, looking directly at Tiffany. "I'm leaving you a responsibility." Tiffany stared at the document as if it were a strange, alien object. Richard picked it up, his brow furrowed in concentration as he read the first page. "A charitable foundation?" he asked, looking up at me, confused. "What does this mean?" Arthur, my old friend, cleared his throat. "It means, son," he said in his slow, deliberate way, "that Margaret is converting $100 million of her personal fortune into a foundation dedicated to providing educational grants and startup funding. Specifically," he added, tapping a clause on the page, "for individuals from underprivileged backgrounds, pursuing careers in back-office financial fields, operations, compliance, auditing, the unglamorous, essential work." I watched Tiffany's face. I saw her process the information. The money wasn't for her. It was for people like me, people who did the quiet, necessary work that the world ignored. "The foundation will be run by a board," I continued, "and I want you two to be on it, not as owners, as stewards. You won't draw a salary beyond a modest stipend. You won't be able to use the funds for personal reasons. Your job will be to find the next Margaret Miller, to give someone else the chance I had to build." Tiffany finally looked up from the page. There were tears in her eyes. But for the first time, they weren't tears of self-pity or greed. They were tears of understanding. "You're not giving us a fish," she whispered. "You're teaching us how to fish." "More than that," I said. "I'm giving you a purpose beyond yourselves. Your child won't grow up with a trust fund. They will grow up with a legacy of giving back. They will learn that true wealth isn't what you have, it's what you do with what you have. Richard closed the document and placed it gently on the table. He looked at Tiffany, and a silent conversation passed between them. He nodded. Tiffany turned to me, her face filled with a resolve I had never seen before. "We accept," she said. It was a simple phrase, but it was the beginning of everything. Over the next few months, as Tiffany's belly grew, we built the foundation together. We worked out of a small rented office, not my gleaming corporate headquarters. Tiffany had a natural talent for it. She had her mother's analytical mind, but she also had a warmth and empathy I had long suppressed. She could connect with people, hear their stories, see their potential. Richard handled the financial side with a quiet competence that was impressive. For the first time, I saw them as a team, a real partnership. We were healing. It wasn't a sudden, miraculous cure. It was a slow, painful process. There were days of awkward silence, days when the ghosts of old hurts would rise up between us. But we kept showing up. We kept working. We kept trying. The day my granddaughter was born was the day the world was born anew. They named her Sophia. I held her in my arms, this tiny, perfect creature, and I looked at her small, wrinkled face. She had my eyes. I made a silent promise to her. "You will never have to hide," I whispered. "You will know who you are and who your family is from the very beginning. You will know that your grandmother was a bank clerk, and you will know that she was a queen, and you will know that she was both at the same time." It's been a year since Sophia was born. Our lives are unrecognizably different. I sold the penthouse. It was too big, too quiet. I now live in a comfortable 3-bedroom apartment, big enough for my granddaughter to have a room to play in when she stays over, which is often. The foundation is thriving. Last month, we gave our first major grant to a young woman from the south side of Chicago, a single mother who wants to become a certified fraud examiner. Tiffany found her. She saw the same fire in her eyes that I once had in mine. Tiffany and Richard never recovered their old life. They never will. They live in a modest house they can afford. They drive a sensible car. They are, for the first time, truly happy. Their happiness is not the loud, brittle kind that comes from new possessions. It's a quiet, solid thing, built on shared purpose and mutual respect. Our relationship is not perfect. There are scars. There are memories that still hurt. The words "fat cow" will always hang in the air between us, a ghost of the people we used to be, but it no longer has the power to destroy. It is a reminder of how far we have come, a reminder of what is truly at stake. Sometimes, when I watch Tiffany on the floor, playing with her daughter, I see the little girl with the braids and the gap-toothed grin, and I see the cruel, beautiful stranger from the party, and I see the strong, compassionate woman she is becoming. She is all of them, just as I am both Margaret Miller, the bank clerk, and Croft, the tycoon. We are complex. We are flawed. We are family. A few weeks ago, Mr. Davenport invited us all to his home for dinner. The first time I had been back since that terrible night. As we walked in, I saw that Tiffany was wearing a simple navy blue dress, a quiet tribute. This time, there was no laughter. There was no scorn. There was just the quiet warmth of a family, scarred and broken, but slowly, painstakingly, putting itself back together. After dinner, I was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights, when Sophia toddled over and wrapped her small arms around my leg. I picked her up and held her close, her warm breath on my neck. Tiffany came and stood beside me. She didn't say anything. She just put her arm around my shoulders. We stood there for a long time, 3 generations of women looking out at the world. My name is Margaret Miller. I am 69 years old. I have been poor and I have been rich. I have been invisible and I have been seen. I have been a mother who was betrayed, and I am a grandmother who is loved. My story is not about money. It was never about the money. It's about the price you pay for secrets and the impossible, beautiful work of forgiveness. It's about learning that true wealth is not an empire of things. It is a legacy of love, strong enough to survive the truth.